This video didn't appear on your screen by accident, and I can prove that to you right now, not through mysticism, but through cold statistics. Only 3% of humanity can even comprehend what I'm about to reveal in the next 40 minutes. But here's what makes you different. If the word nous resonated with you when you read that title, even without knowing exactly what it means, Thoth is signaling something profound about your consciousness level. And by the end of this video, you'll know exactly what that signal means and why it's happening in your life right now. Let me be absolutely direct with you from the beginning, because your time is valuable and this information changes everything. Thoth measured 9 frequencies of the nous over millennia of observing human consciousness evolution. Most human beings operate only in the first 3 frequencies during their entire physical existence. They're born, they live, and they die, without ever accessing the higher levels of perception that are available to them. You who are watching this right now, who felt something unexplainable when you saw that specific title, who were magnetically drawn to click on this video, you've already surpassed those first 3 frequencies. This isn't cheap flattery to make you feel special. This is recognition of an observable fact about your consciousness. The question was never whether you can access higher frequencies. Your presence here already answers that affirmatively. The real question, the only question that matters now, is whether you're going to accept the monumental responsibility that comes with that access. Because spiritual responsibility isn't optional when you awaken. It's a natural and inevitable consequence. The more you see, the more you're called to respond. The more you know, the more you're required to act. There's no middle ground in this territory. Before we dive specifically into the 9 frequencies, you need to understand what the nous actually is. And I need to warn you that most modern translations fail terribly at capturing the depth of this concept. The nous is not simply mind or intellect as we find in superficial translations from the Greek. That linguistic reduction hides the true transformative power of this fundamental Hermetic concept. The nous is the divine mind itself. It's the very conscious essence of God, manifested as pure creative intelligence in the cosmos. It's not your personal mind thinking everyday thoughts about groceries and schedules. It's the universal mind operating through your individual consciousness. In the Corpus Hermeticum, specifically in the treatise Poimandres, Hermes Trismegistus describes the nous as the pure and conscious light that existed even before material manifestation. That light, he said, am I, thy God-mind, prior to the moist nature which appeared out of darkness. The nous precedes matter. The nous creates matter through structured intelligence. The nous is the specific faculty that allows true gnosis. And gnosis here doesn't mean intellectual knowledge accumulated through study. Gnosis is transcendent, direct, experiential knowledge that cannot be adequately communicated in words because it transcends articulated language. It's knowledge that you become, not knowledge that you possess. This is why Hermes teaches with precision that knowledge of the supreme good is sacred silence and a quieting of all the senses. It's not about learning more information. It's about becoming wisdom itself incarnated. When you operate from activated nous, you don't think about truth. You perceive truth directly. There's no intermediary. There's no linear, logical reasoning process. Truth reveals itself instantaneously as pure perception. This terrifies the conditioned mind because it loses the control it believes it has. Now comes the crucial revelation that most contemporary spiritual teachings avoid mentioning for fear of seeming exclusive. Hermes Trismegistus teaches with crystal clarity in the Corpus Hermeticum that God granted the Logos, which is discursive reason and the capacity for articulated language, to all humans without exception. Every human being can think logically and communicate through words, but God did not distribute the nous equally to all. The nous was deliberately established as a prize to be won by souls through progressive consciousness development. This means that access to the divine mind is not democratic. It's not distributed equally at birth. It's not for everyone simultaneously. And this isn't spiritual elitism created by arrogant humans. This is cosmic law established by the very structure of creation itself. Some are ready, others are not. And that's perfectly correct within the greater evolutionary plan. If you're feeling growing discomfort with this information right now, observe that discomfort without judgment. It comes from the conditioned ego that wants to believe spirituality is democratic, that everyone has equal access to everything, that positive intention alone is sufficient. But ask yourself with brutal honesty, would you give the keys to a Ferrari to someone who doesn't know how to drive even a basic car? Would you hand surgical instruments to someone who hasn't studied anatomy and medicine? Would you put a 5-year-old child in the pilot seat of a commercial airplane? The nous is absolute creative power. It's the capacity to mold reality through focused consciousness. In unprepared hands, untrained hands, unpurified hands, this power destroys instead of builds. It unbalances instead of harmonizes. This is why progressive preparation exists. This is why gradual initiations exist. This is why authentic masters test students rigorously before transmitting certain knowledge. This is exactly why frequencies exist. Progressive levels of access to the nous that depend on accumulated soul development through multiple incarnations. And here's something most people don't realize. You don't start from zero in this life. You're not a spiritual blank slate. You bring memory from other lives, preparation that happened in dimensions and time periods you don't even consciously remember right now. And it's exactly that prior preparation, that accumulated work through multiple existences, that determines which nous frequency you can sustain now without collapsing. Some souls arrive already operating at frequency 4 or 5 since childhood. Others need to awaken gradually over decades. There's no judgment in that. There's only recognition of where each consciousness is on the greater evolutionary map. What matters isn't where you are now. What matters is the direction of your consciousness movement. Let's map the complete system of the 9 frequencies with details you won't find anywhere else. Frequencies 1 through 3 are where 97% of humanity remains during their entire physical existence. Frequency 1 is basic survival consciousness, total identification with the dense physical body, operating only in refined animal instinct. The person at this level lives entirely to satisfy bodily needs: food, sleep, sex, physical security. The concept of spiritual existence doesn't even form as a cognitive possibility. Frequency 2 is the initial emotional awakening. It's that first vague perception that there's something more beyond the immediately perceptible material world. The person begins asking questions about meaning. Why am I here? Is there something after death? Does the universe have purpose? These initial questions still don't have answers, but the simple fact they're arising indicates upward movement on the frequency scale. Frequency 3 is where spiritual seeking becomes active and conscious. The person begins intentionally consuming spiritual content, watches videos like this, reads books about metaphysics, attends lectures, experiments with guided meditations. There's genuine curiosity, but still without deep commitment to real transformation. It's knowledge as an interesting hobby, not as existential alchemy. Daily life continues operating in the same egoic patterns. Only a superficial spiritual layer has been added over the basic psychological structure that remains unchanged. The absolute majority of spiritual seekers stops exactly at frequency 3. They read voraciously, watch hundreds of videos, consume mountains of information, collect concepts like their intellectual trophies, but they don't structurally transform. They accumulate spiritual information as a sophisticated form of entertainment, but their emotional lives, their automatic reactions, their relationship patterns, their way of dealing with money and power, all of that remains fundamentally the same. It's knowledge as mental decoration, not as a transmutation tool. Frequencies 4 and 5 are the territory of the ready ones. Approximately 15 to 20% of serious spiritual seekers reach this level at some point in life. The transition from 3 to 4 is marked by a dramatic qualitative leap. Frequency 4 activates what we call encoded universal memory. You begin having spontaneous access to past life records, not as imaginative fantasy, but as usable and verifiable information that changes your understanding of who you are. Your intuition expands dramatically and becomes reliable. You know things without knowing how you know them. Information arises complete in your consciousness, without prior logical process. You meet people and feel you've known them for centuries. You visit places for the first time and recognize details you shouldn't know. You read ancient texts and comprehend layers of meaning that aren't explicit. All of this indicates universal memory is becoming accessible. Frequency 5 is the decoding of mysteries proper. You develop natural capacity to understand deep symbolism instantaneously, without need for intellectual interpretation. Synchronicities stop being occasional surprises and become everyday language through which the universe constantly communicates with you. You perceive the signs, you read the symbols, you decode the messages hidden in apparently casual events. Hermetic texts that previously seemed confusing or contradictory now make perfect sense on first reading. You perceive fractal patterns that repeat at different scales, from individual human behavior to collective historical movements. You see the underlying structure of reality that others cannot perceive. The ready ones don't just passively seek knowledge, they actively apply. Each received teaching becomes immediate living practice. Each insight turns into concrete action within the next 24 hours. There's no accumulation, there's metabolization. Frequencies 6 through 9 are emerald territory proper. Less than 3% of humanity reaches this level in each specific incarnation. Frequency 6 is creation through conscious and refined imaginal. Deliberate manifestation becomes natural and repeatable capacity, not occasional event. You master creative visualization not as mechanical technique you practice, but as organic extension of your being. What you imagine with crystalline clarity and consistent elevated emotion materializes in the physical plane with speed that initially frightens even yourself. The boundary between internal world of imagination and external world of physical manifestation starts becoming porous and fluid. You realize it was always like this, but you weren't conscious of your creative power. Now you are. And with consciousness comes proportional responsibility to use this power with wisdom and deep ethical alignment. Frequency 7 is reconciliation of polarities at all manifestation levels. Complete and permanent integration of shadow and light within your psyche. You no longer fight your dense, dark, unwanted aspects. You consciously transmute them through acceptance and inner alchemy. Absolute balance between internal masculine and feminine energies. There's no more civil, psychological war within you. All parts are integrated, harmonized, working in synergy for the unified soul purpose. Frequency 8 is total consciousness integration. It's the synthesis of all gifts, abilities and capacities developed in previous frequencies. Everything unifies. Intuition and logic merge. Emotion and reason collaborate. Body and spirit operate as unity. It's the final preparation, the ultimate purification before the supreme leap to maximum frequency. And then there's frequency 9. Embodied supreme wisdom, complete and permanently active nous, direct, stable and continuous connection with the universal divine mind. The emeralds who reach this level don't study Thoth as external historical figure. They become conscious channels of Thoth. The separation between student and master dissolves completely because limited personal identity has been transcended. You don't observe wisdom from afar. You are wisdom manifested in temporary human form. Imagine a colossal sacred mountain. Most of humanity sees the mountain from distance, admiring its majesty from afar, maybe taking photos but never considering climbing. That's frequency 1 through 3. Some arrive at base camp after long journey, begin preparations for real ascent, gradually acclimatize to altitude. That's frequency 5. But NOUS NINE is the absolute summit, the maximum peak, reached only by those who complete the entire mastery journey with unwavering discipline, renouncing countless temptations to quit along the way. Now, I need to clarify something absolutely fundamental about Thoth's 12 pyramids, because massive confusion exists about this topic, even among advanced students. The 12 pyramids are not physical stone structures buried in specific geographical locations waiting to be discovered by archaeologists. They are vibrational frequency fields that exist primarily in higher dimensions of reality. They are multi-dimensional energetic structures, pure consciousness architectures built with sacred geometry of light. When I use the word pyramid, you need to think of living and conscious light geometry, not stacked physical granite blocks. Thoth's pyramids are energetic matrices, morphogenetic fields, pure information structures that organize consciousness into specific patterns. They exist in the etheric, astral, mental, and causal planes of creation. When esoteric tradition mentions specific geographical locations like Antarctica, Tibet, Egypt, Mexico, Canada, it doesn't mean there are physical pyramids hidden or buried in those places waiting for excavation. Those geographical points on Earth function as access portals, as dimensional anchors, as connection points between the dense physical plane and the higher dimensional frequencies where the true pyramids exist. They are energetic anchors in the physical plane that facilitate connection with vibrational structures existing in higher dimensions. Just as you use a physical door to enter a house, those specific points on Earth are dimensional doors to access the light pyramids existing at frequencies beyond common physical perception range. The true pyramid, the real structure, exists in the etheric, astral, or causal plane, depending on that particular pyramid's specific vibrational frequency. Each of the 12 pyramids is a specific energetic field of the universal creational matrix. Each has specific guardian, particular consciousness function, and unique vibrational frequency. You don't physically travel to them like a tourist visiting monuments. You elevate your consciousness frequency through meditation, visualization, or altered states until you vibrationally resonate with them. When resonance happens, you access the pyramid. This is why deep meditation, shamanic states, sacramental psychedelic experiences, and lucid dreams allow visiting these dimensional pyramids in verifiable and transformative ways. You're accessing real structures existing at frequencies beyond the physical. The physical pyramid of Giza that you can touch with your hands is a material representation, a three-dimensional anchor, a reflection in the dense world of a structure that exists primarily in higher dimensions. The ancient Egyptians built in physical stone what Thoth showed them in etheric light during temple initiations. They anchored in the dense physical plane a geometrically precise reflection of what exists eternally in the higher planes of light. As above, so below. The stone is the three-dimensional echo. The dimensional light is the eternal original. Pyramid 9 specifically has its geographical access portal in northern Canada, deep Arctic region. But the true pyramid exists permanently in the 9th dimensional frequency. Its supreme guardian is Sophia Hokmat. Sophia means wisdom in Greek. Hokmat means wisdom in Hebrew. So her name is literally wisdom, wisdom. Intentional double emphasis. She's not just a guardian who protects the pyramid, she is the creator of all manifested knowledge. Sophia dictates primordial wisdom. Thoth writes and structures that wisdom into transmissible language. That's the symbiotic relationship between them. She is the source. He is the transmission channel. Most seekers look for Thoth as if he were the final source of wisdom. But Thoth, being an authentic master, points beyond himself. He doesn't place himself as origin of universal wisdom. He humbly places himself as scribe of wisdom that emanates from Sophia. Accessing Nous-9 requires recognizing and honoring the divine feminine as primordial origin of all manifested wisdom. Sophia Hokmat represents wisdom that precedes articulated word, that exists before language, that transcends concepts. This is why true nous at its highest level is described as sacred silence, because Sophia operates completely beyond discursive language. She communicates through direct perception, pure gnosis, knowledge that cannot be adequately verbalized. When you reach Nous 9, the 12 light pyramids are no longer separate places you occasionally visit in deep meditations. They become frequencies you permanently inhabit as your natural state of being. You don't go to Pyramid 9 as external destination. You continuously vibrate in Pyramid 9 frequency as your expanded identity. The distinction between you as observer and pyramid as observed object completely disappears. You become living and conscious portal of that dimensional frequency. Let me give you concrete and verifiable signs now that you're already operating beyond frequency 3. If you experience frequent and intense déjà vu, not casual, but deeply meaningful, this indicates frequency 4 is active in your system. If you regularly dream of places you've never physically visited but recognize every detail perfectly upon waking, your universal memory is actively awakening. If you feel magnetic, inexplicable attraction to specific historical periods like ancient Egypt, classical Greece, mythical Atlantis, lost civilizations, your soul is remembering previous incarnations in those contexts. If you've had multiple experiences of knowing specific information before formally learning it through study, if you have abnormal facility for understanding complex symbolism and universal archetypes without formal training, you're definitely operating at frequency 4 minimum. If synchronicities are no longer occasional surprises but have become expected everyday language through which you perceive the universe constantly communicating, you've definitely entered frequency 5. If you can read people instantly, perceiving hidden intentions, suppressed emotions, seeing through all social masks they wear, frequency 5 is confirmed and stable. If profound insights arrive complete in your consciousness, not in fragments you need to laboriously assemble, if dense hermetic and philosophical texts make crystalline sense on first reading without need for prolonged analysis, if you perceive fractal patterns repeating at different reality scales that others cannot see, you're firmly established at frequency 5 minimum. If you feel growing and unbearable discomfort with superficial conversations about trivial matters, if small, mundane, day-to-day subjects seem unbearably empty and meaningless, this isn't spiritual arrogance, as some people might accuse. It's natural and inevitable vibrational incompatibility. You literally vibrate at different frequency than most. Harmonic resonance doesn't happen. Discomfort is natural consequence. Now the unmistakable signs of emerald territory, frequency 6 onward. Manifestations begin happening with speed that initially frightens you. You clearly think about something specific with focused emotion, and within days, sometimes hours, that materializes in the physical world in surprising ways. You feel other people's emotions as if they were literally yours, expanded empathy so intense it sometimes physically hurts in your body. You experience regular download periods where dense information flows into your consciousness without mental effort, as if someone were dictating directly into your mind knowledge you didn't formally study. You feel that time behaves differently around you compared to other people. Hours pass, like minutes when you're in deep creative flow states, or minutes stretch like hours in moments of expanded presence and altered consciousness. People naturally seek you for deep counsel, even without you offering or positioning yourself as counselor. They feel your frequency and are attracted. You know specific things about people they definitely didn't tell you verbally. You see beyond what's being explicitly said, perceiving hidden layers of meaning in each interaction. If you identified 5 or more of these signs operating regularly in your life, you've already surpassed where 80% of humanity will ever reach in entire existence. This isn't to inflate your ego, it's factual recognition. The question was never whether you can access higher frequencies. Your experience already answers that affirmatively. The single crucial question is whether you'll completely accept the proportional responsibility that comes with this level of access. Because spiritual responsibility is non-negotiable when you awaken. It's automatic consequence. The more you perceive, the more you're called to respond. The more you know through direct experience, the more you're charged in terms of aligned action in the world. There's no awakening without corresponding responsibility. The two are inseparable. There are 3 main blocks preventing access to NOUS 9, even in souls who've done extensive preparation in other lives. The first block is accumulation, without metabolic integration. This is by far the most common error among advanced and well-intentioned seekers, voraciously consuming spiritual information as if it were sophisticated intellectual entertainment. Reading 50 books in a year and not deeply applying any of them in real life. Watching hundreds of videos, taking dozens of courses, accumulating spiritual certifications and diplomas, but not structurally transforming the psyche. Thoth teaches in the demotic texts that knowledge not consistently used becomes dead weight in consciousness, not liberation tool. For each teaching you receive, ask this question without self-deception. How exactly does this change my concrete behavior tomorrow morning? If it changes absolutely nothing in terms of action, you're just accumulating mental garbage, elegantly disguised as spiritual development. It's better to completely master a single hermetic principle than superficially know 100. Depth beats breadth always in terms of real transformation. The second block is rigid identification with spiritual seeker identity. This is an extremely subtle psychological paradox. The very identity of being someone who seeks spirituality prevents definitive arrival at destination. While you fundamentally see yourself as someone seeking something external, you maintain psychological distance from what you seek. The spiritual ego is infinitely more subtle and dangerously more powerful than material ego because it perfectly disguises itself as humility and devotion. You need to recognize the radical truth. You're not seeking nous as something external to conquer in the future. You're progressively remembering you already possess the nous dormant within. Nous isn't treasure buried in distant land. It's innate capacity temporarily forgotten. It's something internal to unveil through removal of conditioning layers, not something external to add through accumulation. The third block is what absolutely no one admits having, because it deeply wounds spiritual self-image. Unconscious fear of responsibility that comes with real wisdom. NOUS 9 comes with non-negotiable existential weight. You can no longer comfortably pretend you don't know. Ignorance stops being viable excuse. Many souls unconsciously and creatively sabotage their own final awakening specifically to avoid the monumental responsibility that comes with complete wisdom. Ignorance is incredibly psychologically comfortable. You can blame circumstances, other people, fate, karma. Wisdom eliminates all excuses. It demands consistent action aligned with knowledge. It demands leadership by example. It demands total integrity between what you know and what you do. That's terrifying for the ego that prefers comfort to growth. Consciously accept that awakening is an irreversible process, and that this irreversibility is profoundly good, not bad. Declare this phrase out loud now, alone. I completely accept the responsibility that comes with each level of wisdom I seek. I commit to acting according to what I know, not just knowing intellectually. Now I'm going to give you the verification protocol. 7 questions that function as merciless mirror of the soul. In the mystery schools of ancient Egypt, initiation candidates passed through extremely rigorous interrogations before being accepted into inner circles. Masters asked questions specifically designed to expose self-deception. These 7 questions I'm about to give you now function as precise diagnosis of your current frequency level. You need to answer with brutal honesty, not as you'd ideally like to be, but as you really are at this exact life moment. First question. If absolutely no one ever knew about your spiritual path, if you couldn't post anything, couldn't tell anyone, couldn't receive any recognition or external validation, would you still follow it with the same intensity? This question tests fundamental motivation. Genuine transformation seeking versus external validation seeking and spiritual identity construction to impress others. Second question. What was the last specific time you applied a spiritual teaching when it was genuinely difficult, uncomfortable, contrary to your immediate desires? Can you remember date and situation? This question tests real integration. Beautiful theory versus practice under extreme real-life pressure. Third question. Can you maintain complete inner silence for 10 continuous minutes without any technique, without guide, without background music, just you and your naked consciousness? This question tests direct mental mastery, dependence on external stimuli versus true consciousness autonomy. Fourth question. When someone deeply irritates you, offends you, provokes you, do you react automatically or can you pause and consciously choose your response? Be honest about your real success rate. This question tests polarity transmutation, genuine emotional control versus suppression disguised as spirituality. Fifth question. Have you ever received a profound spiritual insight and managed to keep it in complete silence, not telling absolutely anyone, without posting on social media, without sharing to seem wise? This question tests spiritual ego, compulsive need to appear wise versus silent wisdom that needs no audience. Sixth question. What uncomfortable truth about yourself do you still consciously avoid looking at directly? We all have at least one. What's yours? This question tests shadow integration, radical honesty with yourself versus sophisticated self-deception. Seventh question. If Thoth appeared materially right now in front of you and asked directly, why exactly do you deserve access to NOUS 9, what would you answer without preparation? This question tests purpose clarity, ego-seeking power versus soul-seeking to serve. Don't answer these 7 questions verbally now. That would be superficial. Take them deeply with you. Reflect on each over the next 7 consecutive days. 1 question per day in silent contemplation. Write your honest answers in private journal. Observe how they evolve throughout the entire week. Your final answers will reveal with surgical precision exactly where you are on the map of 9 frequencies. I'm going to describe now what happens when NOUS 9 completely activates and permanently stabilizes. This isn't New Age fantasy. It's the consciousness state that Thoth, Hermes Trismegistus, and all great Hermetic masters consistently describe in authentic texts. Perception absolutely unifies. The illusory separation between observer self and observed universe completely dissolves, not as beautiful philosophical concept, but as permanently lived experience, moment to moment. You don't observe reality as separate spectator. You consciously participate in it as integrated co-creator. Each person you meet, each event that happens, each object you perceive, everything is immediately recognized as unique expression of the whole, manifested in temporary form. Duality is seen as useful illusion, not fundamental truth. Knowledge becomes instantaneous and direct. You don't need to laboriously think to know. Knowledge is simply available when necessary. Questions answer themselves the exact moment they arise in consciousness. The artificial difference between intuition and reasoning completely disappears because both merge into unified direct perception. You just know. Explaining how you know becomes impossible and unnecessary. Time stops being experienced as linear and sequential. Past, present, and future become simultaneously accessible as unified field of possibilities. You remember probable future events with same clarity you remember confirmed past events. The concept of anxiously waiting for something in the future loses meaning completely. Everything is already here. Inner silence becomes your permanent base state. The incessant chattering mind definitively ceases, not through suppression effort, but naturally through transcendence. Thoughts arise when functionally necessary for specific tasks and completely dissolve when they complete their function. Deep peace isn't something you achieve through practice. It's recognized as the natural state that was always present under mental noise. Impersonal and universal compassion spontaneously arises. Love for absolutely all beings without exception, not as romantic, sentimental feeling, but as structural recognition of unity. You see each soul exactly where it needs to be in its unique evolutionary process. There's no more judgment. Help flows naturally when appropriate without any need for recognition, gratitude, or validation. But let me clarify something crucial to avoid spiritual fantasy. NOUS 9 doesn't mean you float in permanent mystical ecstasy all day. It means you operate with absolute, unshakable clarity within common everyday life. Authentic masters wash dishes, pay bills, face practical problems, experience challenges. But they do this from a completely unshakable inner center. The radical difference isn't in what you do externally. The difference is in who you are internally while doing it. We return now to this video's title to close the cycle. You didn't return, he returned. What does this mean precisely? You didn't actively seek this knowledge through personal effort. Something much greater magnetically brought you here. Thoth returned to your consciousness field at this specific moment because you're energetically ready for the next activation level. It doesn't matter which frequency you're operating at now, whether 3, 5, or 7. The simple fact of being here watching until this final moment indicates unmistakable upward movement on the consciousness scale. Thoth never forces anyone. He offers. He presents opportunities. This entire video was the offer. Now the choice is exclusively and totally yours. You can close this tab now and continue your life exactly as before, as if nothing happened. Or you can consciously accept that something irreversibly changed within you and act in total accordance with that change. The next 72 hours are absolutely critical. What you specifically do with this knowledge in the next 3 days completely determines whether it activates as living wisdom or sediments as more accumulated inert information. 3 immediate non-negotiable actions. First action, answer the 7 verification questions over the next 7 consecutive days. 1 question per day in deep, silent contemplation with brutal honesty that pierces all self-deception. Write your genuine answers in private journal. Carefully observe how they evolve and deepen throughout the entire week. Second action, meticulously observe your synchronicities during this week. Write down absolutely each one the moment it happens, however minor or insignificant it initially seems. You'll discover repetitive patterns revealing specific messages for you. Third action, declare this phrase out loud, alone, with total intention. I completely accept the responsibility of all knowledge I've received. I solemnly commit to apply, not just passively consume. May Sophia Hokmat deeply guide my understanding, and may Thoth clearly structure my expression in the world. If you felt deep in your soul that this video was created specifically for you, comment NOUS 9 now. If you consciously accept Thoth's call to higher consciousness frequencies, comment Emerald. If you want a video dedicated exclusively to Guardian Sophia Hokmat and the complete protocol of how to access Dimensional Pyramid 9, comment Sophia. Your comments aren't just superficial algorithm engagement, they are public declaration of consciousness intention, and public intention has amplified manifestation power. Subscribe to this channel now. If you recognize this isn't common generic spiritual content, activate notification bell to receive alerts, because the next video will reveal the complete Hermetic protocol for accessing Pyramid 9. Not as physical place to travel, but as dimensional vibrational frequency you can consciously tune into. I'll explain step by step exactly how to elevate your vibration until you perfectly resonate with Sophia and receive what she calls direct download of creation source code. And if you want to dive incomparably deeper than public videos allow, join this channel's exclusive members club. The link is in the description below. There you'll have complete access to exclusive videos that will never be publicly published, specific guided frequencies for each of the 9 Nous frequencies, videos released weeks before they launch here, content that deepens and practically applies everything you saw here. The Nous isn't something external you conquer through effort. It's something internal you remember you've always been since the beginning. Thoth returned specifically to your consciousness to remind you of that truth. Now, finally, remember completely.